So, picture this. You're the Karani, right? These crystal-like beings who spent the last 1,000 years basically being the galaxy's librarians. And I mean that literally. While other species were out there building massive war fleets and conquering star systems, the Karani were cataloging every piece of knowledge they could find. They built these beautiful crystal cities that looked like giant libraries, where they'd spend their days studying, learning, and sharing information with anyone who asked. Never hurt a fly, never wanted to. These guys were so peaceful that their biggest weapon was basically a fancy stun gun they used to stop wild animals from eating their crops. Their idea of conflict resolution? A strongly worded diplomatic note. Maybe a trade embargo if you really made them mad. They believed that every problem in the universe could be solved if everyone just sat down and talked about it like reasonable beings. For 1,000 years, that actually worked pretty well for them. They became the go-to species when other civilizations needed information, research, or just someone neutral to mediate disputes. The Karani were like the Switzerland of space. Nobody bothered them because they bothered nobody, and everyone found them useful. But then the Hive Collective showed up. Think space locusts with a really bad attitude, and you're getting close. These things aren't just hungry. They're intelligent hungry. They don't just eat planets. They study them first. They figure out the most efficient way to strip every single useful resource, including the people living there. And the Karani? Well, they'd never seen anything like this before. The first colony to fall was New Harmony, a research station on the Outer Rim. 3 million Karani lived there, working on some kind of advanced agricultural project. The Hive arrived without warning, and within 6 hours, the planet was silent. When the rescue ships arrived 2 days later, they found a world stripped down to bare rock. Not even the atmosphere was left. That's when the Karani realized they were dealing with something completely outside their experience. This wasn't a territorial dispute or trade disagreement. This was systematic extinction, and they had absolutely no idea how to fight back. The next colony fell a week later. Then another. Each time, the Hive got more efficient, more brutal. They started targeting the Karani's communication networks first, cutting off any chance for evacuation. Families were torn apart. Research stations that had taken decades to build were consumed in hours, and still the Hive kept coming. Now the Karani are broadcasting on every channel they can find, and you can hear the desperation in their voices. These beings who had spent centuries speaking in calm, measured tones were crying into the void. Please, someone help us. We'll give you anything, our technology, our resources, our entire accumulated knowledge base. Just please stop these things from turning our children into biomass. And here's the kicker. They actually had stuff worth trading. The Karani had developed technologies that could revolutionize medicine, agriculture, even faster than light travel. They were offering to share discoveries that had taken them centuries to perfect. This wasn't just a cry for help. This was a civilization putting everything they'd ever achieved on the table, hoping someone, anyone, would care enough to save them. You know what the Galactic Council does? They schedule a committee meeting. For next month, the same organization that could mobilize trade fleets in hours when profits were involved suddenly needed weeks of bureaucratic process to discuss genocide. Committee members started debating jurisdiction, asking whether the Hive technically violated any existing treaties, wondering if intervention might set a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, entire worlds are getting stripped down to the bedrock. The Hive isn't waiting for committee meetings. They're not interested in diplomacy or negotiations. Every day the council debates. Another million Karani die. The surviving Karani leaders are watching their species vanish in real time, and the galaxy's premier governing body is worried about paperwork. Some committee members even suggested that maybe the Karani should try communicating better with the Hive, as if these creatures that literally consume entire ecosystems for breakfast might be interested in a peaceful chat. That's when Earth picks up the signal. Now, most of the galaxy at this point knows humans exist, but we're still the new kids on the block. We've only had faster-than-light travel for about 50 years, and frankly, most species prefer to keep their distance from us. See, we've got this reputation. Word gets around that humans come from what they call a Class 12 death world, and suddenly nobody wants to invite you to their dinner parties. But Earth's deep space monitoring stations are picking up every desperate broadcast Karani are sending out, and something about their situation hits different for us. Maybe it's because we know what it's like to face extinction. Maybe it's because we've seen what happens when good people get consumed by something evil and unstoppable. Or maybe it's just because we're human, and when we hear someone screaming for help, our first instinct isn't to form a committee. Now, most species in the galaxy know about humans by this point, and what they know scares them. See, we're from what they call a Class 12 death world. That's their polite way of saying, how the hell did anything survive long enough to evolve there? Let me paint you a picture of what makes Earth so terrifying to other species. Most civilized worlds are basically paradise planets. Stable weather, friendly wildlife, maybe a few mild season changes. The kind of place where the biggest natural disaster might be a light drizzle that lasts too long. Earth, our weather tries to kill us on a regular basis. We got hurricanes that can level entire cities, tornadoes that pick up houses and throw them around like toys, and blizzards that can bury entire towns under 20 feet of snow. We got earthquakes that crack the ground open, volcanoes that turn the sky black for months, and floods that can wash away everything in their path. And that's just the weather. Our animals are absolutely insane by galactic standards. We got bears that can crack your skull with one swipe, sharks that are basically swimming murder machines, and tiny spiders whose bite can kill you in minutes. Hell, we got jellyfish that are practically invisible and so poisonous that just touching one can stop your heart. Most planets have maybe one or two dangerous species. Earth has thousands. Even our plants try to kill us. We got trees that explode when they get too hot, mushrooms that'll fry your brain if you eat them, and flowers that are so toxic you can die just from smelling them wrong. Other species have gardens. We have things that will kill you if you're not careful growing in our backyards. But here's the crazy part, and this is what really freaks out the rest of the galaxy. We looked at all that and said, hold my beer. We didn't just survive on Earth, we thrived. We turned those deadly storms into sources of energy. We domesticated some of those killer animals. And we figured out which of those poisonous plants could actually be medicine if you prepared them right. Every other species that makes it to space usually does it by working together from day one. Peaceful cooperation. Shared resources. Everyone pulling in the same direction. Humans? We spent 10,000 years trying to kill each other in increasingly creative ways, and somehow that made us better at surviving. We fought wars in every environment you can imagine. Desert wars, jungle wars, mountain wars, wars in the frozen Arctic, and wars in swamping heat. We fought with sticks and stones, swords and shields, guns and bombs, and weapons so terrible we promised never to use them again. Then we kept fighting anyway, just with different weapons. By the time we figured out space travel, we'd already solved every tactical problem you could think of. How do you fight when you're outnumbered? We've got 20 different answers. How do you win when your equipment is inferior? We wrote the book on that one. How do you keep fighting when everything seems hopeless? That's basically humanity's greatest skill. So when Admiral Blake Richardson gets a Karani distress call, he's sitting in command center of the Terran Defense Force, and he's got the choice that every other species in the galaxy is avoiding. The smart move, the safe move, would be to do what everyone else is doing. Schedule meetings, form committees, maybe send some strongly worded messages to the Hive asking them to please stop eating entire civilizations. Blake takes one look at the tactical reports, sees a peaceful species getting systematically exterminated by space locusts, and he doesn't even hesitate. He doesn't call Earth for permission, doesn't check with the diplomats, doesn't worry about what this might mean for humanity's reputation in the galaxy. He just keys up the comm and says, Karani homeworld, this is Terran Defense Force. We're 24 hours out. Hold tight. The Karani communication officer who receives that message probably thinks he's hallucinating. Here they are, broadcasting to every major power in the galaxy, offering everything they have, and the response comes from a species most people are still afraid to talk to. 12 ships. That's all Earth sends. The Karani are looking at their sensors, thinking these humans have lost their minds. They're grateful for any help, but 12 ships against the Hive Collective? The Hive's got thousands of ships swarming their system, biomechanical monstrosities the size of cities, and they've been consuming star systems for longer than human civilization has existed. What the Karani don't understand yet is that Blake's got something the Hive doesn't expect. He's not bringing superior numbers or advanced technology. He's bringing something much more dangerous. He's got humans who've been practicing warfare against each other for 10,000 years. See, every other species learned to fight by studying theoretical tactics and maybe dealing with the occasional pirate raid. Humans learned to fight by actually fighting constantly against opponents who knew all the same tricks they did. We didn't just study war, we lived it, breathed it, and got really, really good at it. The Hive Collective is about to learn why the rest of the galaxy calls Earth a death world. It's not just because our planet tries to kill everything on it. It's because we're the things that survived anyway. Here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying if you're not human. See, every other species in the galaxy has this very civilized approach to warfare. Ships line up at a respectful distance, exchange fire with energy weapons, and whoever runs out of shields first retreats to fight another day. Very orderly, very predictable, very much like a chess match in space. Humans? We looked at that whole system and said, that's adorable, but we're going to do something completely different. The Karani are watching their tactical displays as the 12 human ships approach the massive Hive fleet, and they're expecting to see some kind of advanced formation, maybe some superweapon they've never heard of. What they actually see makes their crystal-based minds struggle to process what's happening. Captain Jessica Torres takes a destroyer, a ship called the Persistent Thunder, and does something that breaks every rule of space combat ever written. She aims it straight at the biggest Hive mothership in the fleet and hits the engines. Full speed ahead, no shields, no fancy maneuvering. Just a human destroyer playing chicken with a biomechanical nightmare the size of a small moon. But here's the crazy part. And this is where you start to understand why the rest of the galaxy thinks we're insane. She doesn't go down with her ship like some noble captain from an old movie. About 30 seconds before impact, she and her entire crew bail out in combat suits and start fighting in open space. Think about that for a second. These people just turned their own ship into a guided missile, ejected into the vacuum of space, and decided that fighting a bunch of space monsters without any cover or backup was a logical next step. Who does that? Humans, apparently. The Hive mothership is reeling from the impact. Bits of biomechanical hull flying everywhere. And suddenly it's got 78 humans in powered armor crawling all over it like angry ants, cutting their way inside with plasma torches and explosives. The Hive warriors inside have never dealt with anything like this. They're designed to fight other ships, maybe repel the occasional boarding party that comes through an airlock. They're not designed to deal with humans who just punched a hole in their hull and came in shooting. And that's just the beginning. The other 11 human ships are doing things that make every military academy in the galaxy want to rewrite their textbooks. They're using weapons the galaxy banned centuries ago because they were too inhumane. Nuclear mines that turn enemy ships into radioactive scrap, biological agents designed specifically to target Hive biotechnology, and something they call kinetic bombardment. That's basically dropping telephone poles from orbit at ridiculous speeds. The Karani are watching this unfold, and they're not sure if they should be horrified or grateful. These weapons weren't banned because they didn't work. They were banned because they worked too well. Most civilized species decided that some things were just too terrible to use, even in war. Humans apparently missed that memo. But you know what the really disturbing part is? The humans are laughing. Actually laughing while they're doing it. You can hear it over communication channels. Humans whooping with joy as they blow up Hive ships, cracking jokes while they're fighting for their lives in the vacuum of space, treating this whole thing like it's the most fun they've had in years. Lieutenant Ryan Walsh's squad gets boarded by Hive warriors, and these things are literally bred to be killing machines. 8-foot-tall nightmares with acid for blood and claws that can cut through ship armor. They've been designed by millions of years of evolution and genetic manipulation to be perfect predators. Walsh takes one look at them, and his response gets recorded by his helmet camera and becomes legend throughout human space. Finally, something interesting. What follows is 18 minutes, the most brutal close-quarters combat anyone has ever recorded. The Hive warriors are faster, stronger, and have natural weapons that should give them every advantage. But Walsh and his team have something the Hive doesn't understand. They've been training for this exact situation their entire military careers. See, humans don't just study combat. We practice it obsessively. We run simulations where everything goes wrong. We train for fighting in zero gravity. We learn to operate when we're injured, exhausted, and completely outgunned. We prepare for scenarios that other species consider impossible. And then we figure out how to win them anyway. The Hive warriors expected fear, panic, maybe some desperate last stand. What they got was a squad of humans who had been waiting their entire careers for something this challenging. Walsh's team fights with a combination of military precision and pure human stubbornness that turns what should have been a slaughter into a victory. 18 hours later, the space around the Karani homeworld looks like a junkyard. Thousands of Hive ships are either destroyed or fleeing, and the ones that are running are broadcasting something the galaxy has never heard before. The Hive Collective is afraid. For the first time in their recorded history, the unstoppable force that had been consuming civilizations across the galaxy had met something that not only stopped them, but seemed to enjoy doing it. The surviving Hive ships are jumping to hyperspace like their collective tail is on fire, and they're broadcasting warning signals to the rest of the collective. The message is simple: avoid the humans at all costs. But here's what really freaked out the galaxy. The humans didn't stop there. Most species, when they win a big victory like that, they celebrate for a while, maybe negotiate some favorable trade deals, and then go home. That's how galactic warfare usually works. You fight until someone wins, then everyone shakes hands and gets back to business. Humans looked at that approach and said, absolutely not. See, the Karani homeworld was just the beginning. The Hive Collective had spent the last 3 months systematically consuming every Karani colony they could find. 17 different star systems, 43 planets, research stations, mining operations, agricultural worlds, entire communities that had been building their lives for generations, all gone. But here's the thing about humans that nobody in the galaxy really understood yet. When we commit to something, we don't do it halfway. Admiral Blake Richardson didn't just want to save the Karani homeworld. He wanted to save every single Karani who was still breathing, and he wanted to make sure this never happened to them again. So the human fleet did something unprecedented. They chased the Hive through every occupied Karani system, liberating colonies with an efficiency that bordered on terrifying. These weren't just quick hit-and-run attacks. This was systematic warfare at a level the galaxy had never seen before. The humans had studied every engagement with the Hive, analyzed their tactics, figured out their weaknesses, and developed counter-strategies for every possible scenario. They knew exactly where the Hive would run, how they'd try to regroup, and what their backup plans would be. It was like watching someone play a game where they already knew every move their opponent was going to make. But what really shocked the galactic observers was what came after the fighting. Commander Lisa Patterson's engineering corps would roll in right behind the combat units, and everyone expected them to start claiming territory, setting up military bases, maybe taking control of the most valuable resources. That's what conquerors do, right? Instead, they started rebuilding. These humans who had just finished dismantling the most feared military force in the galaxy were now setting up field hospitals, repairing damaged infrastructure, and organizing relief supplies for refugee populations. They weren't acting like victorious warriors. They were acting like people who genuinely cared about what happened to the Karani. Commander Patterson herself was working 18-hour days, coordinating the reconstruction of an entire star system's worth of damage. Her teams were rebuilding power grids, restoring communication networks, and constructing temporary housing for millions of displaced Karani. And when the Karani officials asked how much this was going to cost them, Patterson just looked confused. "Cost you?" she said. "Why would helping people cost anything?" This was breaking every rule of galactic politics. When one species helps another, there's always a price. Trade agreements, military alliances, resource rights, territorial concessions, something. Help doesn't come free in the galaxy, and it certainly doesn't come from a species that most people are afraid of, but the humans kept doing it anyway. They're setting up hospitals, fixing infrastructure, and when the Karani leadership finally works up the courage to ask Blake why they're not taking the payment they were promised, all that technology, all those resources the Karani had offered in their desperate broadcasts, Blake just shrugs and says, "We didn't do this for payment. We did this because someone needed help." The Karani leadership is standing there trying to process this. These are the same humans who had just spent the last month systematically destroying the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. These are the Deathworlders, the species on the planet where everything tries to kill you, the ones everyone else avoids at diplomatic gatherings. And they're saying they risk their lives and their ships just to help strangers? Dr. Amanda Foster becomes something of a legend during this period. She's a human medical officer who's treating hive toxin victims with techniques that shouldn't even be possible. The hive uses biological weapons that most species can't even begin to understand, let alone counter. But Foster is working 30-hour shifts, developing treatments on the fly, and saving Karani, who other doctors had already written off as hopeless cases. When asked how she's doing it, Foster just says, "That's what you do when people are dying." You figure it out. She's not using some advanced human technology or secret military research. She's using the same thing humans have always used when faced with impossible problems. Pure stubborn determination to not let people suffer if there's anything she can do about it. The Karani medical staff are watching her work, and they can't believe what they're seeing. This human doctor is combining techniques from a dozen different species, improvising treatments with whatever supplies are available, and somehow making it work. She's performing medical miracles through sheer force of will, and the very human refusal to accept that some things can't be fixed. The Karani are watching all this thinking. These are the galaxy's monsters? These are Deathworlders. Because what they're seeing doesn't match the stories at all. Yes, humans are terrifying in combat. Yes, they use weapons and tactics that make other species uncomfortable. But when the fighting stops, they don't act like conquerors or predators. They act like people who just want to help. And that's more frightening to the established galactic order than any weapon the humans could have built. 3 months later, every Karani colony is not just free, it's better defended than it was before the hive showed up. And I mean seriously better defended. The humans didn't just chase off the bad guys and call it a day. They looked at the entire Karani defensive situation and said, yeah, this isn't going to cut it if something like the hive shows up again. So they built what they call a layered defense network. Picture this. Early warning systems that can detect incoming threats from 3 star systems away, automated defense platforms that can track and engage hundreds of targets simultaneously, and shield generators powerful enough to protect entire planets. This isn't just military hardware either. The humans designed everything to be maintained and operated by the Karani themselves. But here's where it gets really interesting. The humans are training Karani crews on human-designed weapon systems, and these peaceful librarians are turning out to be surprisingly good at it. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Wright is running the training programs, and he keeps saying the same thing. You don't have to be violent people to be effective defenders. You just have to care about what you're protecting. The Karani are learning to operate defense grids, coordinate fleet movements, and yes, even handle some of those too dangerous for civilized warfare weapons the humans brought to the party. But they're doing it with the same methodical approach they use for cataloging information. They're not becoming warriors. They're becoming guardians. And word is getting around the galaxy. The humans aren't just protecting the Karani. They're establishing what they call mutual protection agreements with 17 other species. Not conquest, not colonization, just agreements that say, if someone tries to wipe you out, we'll help, and if someone tries to wipe us out, you help back. The Thaxians were first to sign up after their outer colonies got raided by something called the Crimson Fleet. The humans responded to that one in 6 hours and turned the pirates into space debris so fast that other pirate groups started avoiding the Xien space entirely. The Zephyrian Federation signed up after that, then the Kordani Republic, and pretty soon there's a whole network of species who decided that having humans as backup is worth whatever social awkwardness comes with it. But the real moment that changes everything happens when the Galactic Council finally calls their meeting about the hive situation. Remember, these are the same people who wanted to form a committee to study the problem while entire civilizations were being consumed. 3 months too late, they've decided to address the hive crisis. Blake shows up to this meeting with a folder full of after-action reports, casualty lists, and reconstruction schedules. The council chambers are filled with representatives from every major galactic power, all of them expecting to spend weeks debating response strategies and resource allocation. The council chairman, some pompous official from the Centauri Republic, stands up with a prepared speech about coordinated galactic response and systematic approach to threat, and Blake just interrupts him. Problem solved, he says. Next. You could hear a pin drop in that chamber. The chairman is standing there with his mouth open, holding papers full of committee proposals and diplomatic protocols. And this human admiral is telling him the crisis is over. Solved, the chairman stammers. The Hive Collective has been a threat to galactic security for over 2 centuries. You can't simply dash. Blake slides the folder across the table. Hive Collective is scattered. Their main fleet is destroyed, and their remaining forces are avoiding this entire sector of the galaxy. The species they targeted are now better defended than they were before the attacks began. Like I said, problem solved. The representatives are flipping through the reports, and you can see the exact moment when it hits them. The humans didn't just stop the Hive. They eliminated them as a threat entirely. And they did it in 3 months, with 12 ships, while the Council was still trying to schedule their first meeting. That's when the Karani ambassador stands up, this being who 3 months ago was broadcasting desperate pleas for help across the galaxy, begging anyone to save his dying civilization. He looks around at all these powerful representatives who had ignored his people's screams, and he says something that gets recorded in every history book in the galaxy. We call for mercy and receive something greater. We found protectors. The room goes completely silent, because everyone there knows what this means. The balance of power in the galaxy just shifted, and it didn't shift to the biggest military or the richest trade federation or the oldest civilization. It shifted to the species that everyone had been afraid to talk to at parties. And that's how humanity went from being the scary species everyone avoided to being the ones everyone calls when the monsters show up. Because word spreads fast in the galaxy, and the word now is simple. When something threatens to wipe out entire civilizations, the humans will show up, not for profit, not for territory, not for political advantage. They'll show up because someone needs help. And apparently, that's enough reason for humans to cross the galaxy and fight impossible odds. Because sometimes, the only thing that stops a monster is a bigger monster. And humans? Well, we've been the biggest monsters on our block for a very long time. The galaxy is just starting to figure out that maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what they needed.